press repeat. It's lighting and rendering, and this video we're going to look at the other cool things with the Toon shader. I mean, what it's famous for is stuff that I'm sure you've seen. A lot of cartoons, movies use this Toon shader in different ways. So as you saw in the previous video with line, let's have a look at how we can use the Toon shader. So here's a good example of the Toon shader in cartoons, in daily children's shows. They're using the Toon shader. It's all computer animated, but it's meant to kind of look illustrative. So from Transformers, here is something that is a fan favorite for a lot of people, is Spider-Verse from 2018, I believe. And this is using Toon shader. As you can see, it looks, again, very stylized, illustrative, but it is using Toon shader. However, probably the first time I saw the Toon shader was in 2004. This is Appleseed. It's again, beautifully done, very stylized, but also meant to look like it's 2D drawing, when in fact it is completely CG, computer animated. So you can see, like, there's a lot of video games too that use this. I mean, just so many. And I think, this was one of the solutions for the Japanese, was to try to figure out, okay, can we still keep it manga style, yet use modern technology? And this was one of their solutions, was to come up with a Toon shader that made it look like a cartoon, when in fact it was really computer CG. And nowadays, a lot of anime is okay with just CG, and hand frame drawing is kind of still there, but they're definitely a lot more open to the Toon shader and 3D animation. So in this hopefully short demo, I'm going to show you what the outcome is going to be. This is the character that we're going to try to go from computer to make it look like it's hand-drawn using the Toon shader in 3ds Max and using Arnold. So let's get going. All right, so I'm going to go from the head down. I'm going to select on the head. I'm going to go to the slate, and I'm going to go and type in Toon shader. First off, I'm going to make sure that this project is using Arnold. And while I'm there, I'm going to go and change the filter to contour. So the filtering type, Gaussian to contour. So that's good. So when we got that, now we have the Toon map. I'm going to drag that in. And if you recall from the previous one, we're going to need the map to material. And I'm going to bring that in as well. So I'm going to just click and put that in there to the texture map. And so there is our first one. I'm going to go ahead and rename this. Call it hair. And so that's good. And as you can see, as I zoom in, you can see that the contour line is there and the shader's changed a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and apply to selection. So now that's there. And we won't really know the outcome until we render this out, but let's just have a quick render. So there's the render, there's the contour lines. It's still pretty 3D. So let's make some changes. So I'm going to double click on the map, and I'm going to the base color, change this to the color of the hair. It's going to be about a brown. So click OK. There's the brown under base. Then I'm going to go to disable the edge. So disable the edge, it's not needed. So there we have the hair color. So and we're going to need one more thing. We're going to need to add a ramp, and we'll add that ramp to the base tone map. And that's going to control the shading. Type in ramp, and there's ramp RGB, that's what we want, and that's going to go to the base tone map. We're going to go and double click on this and change the colors here. And so we're going to connect this to the specular tone map, because we want to change the specular in terms of the shadows. And double click on the ramp, and we're going to make it kind of like a gray. So I'm going to double click here and double click here, and I'm just going to click and drag this over till we get a nice variation. So this one needs to be more like a gray, so I'm going to go pull that to like a gray. Okay, so I've just clicked on some of the values here just to get it to be a gray to white. So there's if I just click on this, you can see that I was able to do that. So just double click and just set the value to white on one side and then gray to the other. You might have to move this over just a little bit just so we can see the result now. I'm going to click and drag, get that over. Oh. So now when I render this out, let's have a look at the hair. So look, it's looking pretty much the same. All right. One of the main things we forgot to do is add a light. So let's go ahead and add a light to the scene. So we're going to create a sky dome light. So it's Arnold light, and it's a sky dome. Click and drag. There it is. That should be fine. We need to change the color intensity. So under texture, select no map. And under the no map, let's look for environment. So we're going to click physical sky. And we'll just drag this in. Double click on that. And just drag this over here under map 2. It's going to be just an instance. So there's map 2. We double click on that. And we're going to just modify this, change the elevation to 30. And that should be it. We need to also change the exposure to 2. So it's not too bright, and then we'll give it a quick render. So there it is. We added the skylight, and you can see with the sky, creates a nice blue shadow, so I think that looks pretty good. You can also modify the exposure a little bit to maybe a higher value, just so we can catch a little bit more of the speck highlights. So that looks pretty good. And for the purpose of the render times, I think it's also good to go and change some of the attributes. So if there's a little bit of noise, it's okay, but we will save a lot of time this way. So I'm going to change the camera AA to 1, so it should be a lot faster, but not too concerned about the noise. The other thing you can do to also make this even flatter in terms of the hair is to also apply this ramp to the base tone map. So not just the specular tone map, but the base. You can play around the different methods. So there it is, looking like with just the base tone map, and now with just the base tone map, this is what it looks like. So it's even flatter. So that looks pretty good. Okay, so that render looks pretty decent. We added to the base tone map. And now let's go ahead and just copy this and apply this to the skin. So I'm going to select this, not the physical sky, select these. And I'm going to then just shift, drag, click and drag, and now we have another brand new Toon shade. And so let's go ahead and right click this and rename this so now we know it's the skin. And we'll work now with the skin. So we're going to need to adjust the base color of whatever skin color you want. So it's kind of a subtle, maybe a little bit brighter. Double click on the ramp. Since it's already on base color, that's fine. And we'll need to modify this a little bit. We need to change the color. So select on this ramp. And I'm kind of overdoing it. It's a little exaggerated, but I'm going to then click and drag this over to just affect this a little bit more. So now when we have a look at it, it's going to be a little more subtle on the shadows. And lastly, we need to make sure it's attached to the character's skin. So right click and assign material to selection. So the render looked kind of funny, so I went ahead and changed the position of the Arnold light. So now when I render it out, it looks a lot better. It looks like this. So we can see how the Toon shade in terms of the shadows is working. You can notice too that the features on the mouth is not really prevalent, so I'm just going to go back to the Toon shader and modify one or two more things. I'm going to go to the edge color. First we're going to turn it off, and then we'll change the edge color to like a dark brown. And we're going to just decrease the angle threshold, so that way there's less detail but still going to be there. Maybe something like 80 should be okay. So when we render, we should have some nice brown contours around some of the facial features. And so there it is, that little line there. And also we're seeing it around the eyes. So I'm just going to select the eyebrows and make sure the eyebrows on the hair is there too. Right click, assign material. So that's coming along pretty nice on the face and the skin. I'm going to do the same for the skin on the hands. Right click and assign material to selection. Okay, so now I moved along. I've created an eyeball map to material and a Toon map, attached it to the texture map. And I'm going to go ahead, and this is going to be the eyeball. And so I'm going to have to create 3 different shaders. This one is just going to be the white part, so I'm going to go to the base weight, make this 0, so that way it's not going to show any color, so it'll have nothing there. And on over emission is where I will make this 1, and this will make this pure white. I'm going to attach it to the eye. So I'm going to copy the eyeball to make the cornea. So I'm just going to shift click. I'm going to select this and then shift drag. And now we're going to have to look at the cornea. Cornea is interesting because we need it to just have a specularity. So we're just going to go in there and change and disable some things. So we're going to go and disable the edge. So that's disabled. We'll reduce the base weight to 0 because we don't want color on this either. So that's set to 0. We need to change the specular color to a dark gray or medium gray, depends on how much spec you want. And the specular roughness to about 0.3, so it is a little rough, not so circular, although I kind of like it to be 0.1. Let's see, make this white. Let's see how crazy we can make this, or off-white. And then we need to increase the transmission weight, because if we set it to 1, then we won't be able to see the specularity. So it still will be mostly see-through, almost like glass. And then we'll reduce the diffuse, indirect diffuse, indirect specular. So that way we don't have any indirect shading inside the eyeball. For the pupil, we're going to just set this to a black. So those 2 black spots, we can then just going to copy this as well. And this will be the so this will be the dark part in the eye. And I'm just going to go over the base color and set this to black. So base weight of 1, and make this, we'll make this a black. And we'll right click and assign material to selection. So now, on the cornea, just to make sure, you have to put the specular weight to 0.8. And this is what it looks like rendered out. It looks pretty good. The eyes are a little creepy, so we have to go in and select the iris. The way we're going to do that is to first hide the corneas, and we'll zoom in a little bit into the eyeball, and we'll just go ahead and select. So we're going to right click and convert to editable poly, and then from there we should be able to select the faces. So there's the faces selected. Just to make it easier, we are going to go over to default. I'm going to right click and select edged faces so we can see the faces. From here we're going to select one and then go over to the polygon modeling. And so we just hit this panel titles so we can look at this, and we can go under modify selection and click similar. So it creates a ring around that, and we can just go ahead and select a couple of the other ones. So it looks similar. It's selecting pretty well here. Modify selection similar. And we have now where we can add, zoom in a little bit more if you want to get the last little bit there. And from here we can apply the shader to this. So for the iris, I'm going to go ahead and go under surface, just use a standard surface for that, and then apply the standard surface to the selection. I'm going to make sure I rename it. And I'm going to add a ramp to this and apply this to the base color. So there's the base color. Let's make sure you see that zoomed in. And I will go with maybe with a blue. And then it'll go to black. So we'll render that out, see how it looks. A little bit too much black. Go in there, maybe make this a light blue. Let's have a look at it. So it's looking pretty good here. We need to reduce the specular weight to 0 since we don't need the specularity in the bottom here. So there it is, specular weight to 0, and we should be good. So there it is, looks pretty good. So we got to do that for the other eye as well. So moving along here, let's go ahead and start to apply more of the color to the character. And so I'm going to go with kind of a denim for the shirt, or this particular outfit. So I'm going to borrow something from the hair. And this will be the suspenders, so kind of an off blue. And the ramp is a gray to white, so that's fine. I'm going to copy this as well. And this is the suspenders folded. And again, as you see, whatever you want to add color to something different, you'll need a new Toon shader for it. But as you can see, I'm just copying and pasting because this ramp RGB that we're inputting into the Toon is for the base tone map. And so the base tone map is essentially the shadow side of that particular shader, and the material will affect it. So that gray really makes it look very flat. So I'm going to make the inside denim just a little bit lighter in color, like that, and make sure I assign the material to selection. I'm starting to work on some other details. This character's jumper suit. There's going to be two colors, so there's the jumper. In the Toon, I just changed the color, so this one has a base color of an off-white, and they're both going to share the same ramp, and it'll be this kind of a pinkish color. So I'm just going to attach it to this one too. So it's the base tone map, and then I will apply it, the jumper 2, to some faces. And so I selected some faces. It took a while, and the modify selection is similar. And it's not going to be perfect in terms of the seams. It's going to be okay enough for me. So I'm going to go over to the jumper 2 and assign material to selection. So I'll go through and change add color to a lot of these different things. I like the suspenders with the gray tone, so I'm going to play with this one. And I will use this one, shift, and this will be, click away, and this will be the handkerchief. I'll say scarf. And again, I'll go through each one of these things and start adding to it, and we'll come back. So I'm going to show you a couple of last things here. I've created a Arnold light, and this Arnold light is just a distant light, and it's pointed in the direction of the boots because I wanted to create a specular light, a highlight with this. So under the properties, you can see that this light is set to distance, and I can change the intensity to point or to 2 possibly, and then I can select the boot. And under the stylized highlight, I'm going to take the name of the light, so it's called Arnold Light 2. It should be called something else, but there it is here. And that is what's going to affect the specularity. So I set the specularity to 0.1, the color to an off-white yellow, roughness to 0.5, and because it's pointing in that direction of the boots, as you can see here, it's just in front. When I render this out, you'll see that there is now a highlight. Now the highlight's a little too big, so I'm going to go and decrease this to 0.2, and it should give us more of a Toon shader kind of look. Okay, so it looks a little bit more hot, and I can adjust the specular color just a little bit more, and that should be good. So that looks pretty good. The specular roughness, you can continue to play with this a little bit, and so you can see how it's changing the roughness there, and from the highlight size. So I'd say 0.5 looks the best for me here in this example. And now let's go to the last thing, and that's a silhouette. The Toon edge look, I mean, it looks pretty good, but I think we need to use something called edge silhouette to give it that, like as if it's hand drawn. So we need to enable it on like the silhouette for the pants and things like that, the suspenders. So I'm going to go over to, so I'm just going to turn on edge and then also turn on enable silhouette. I want to make sure the edge color for each of these are the same, so I'm just going to pick like just a kind of a darker yellow-orange for the edge color, and I'll do that the same for other parts. So I'll also change the boots and the stick. So that's the wood, and for the boots, turn that on, and the edge color will be the same there. We'll need to enable silhouette on those things as well. So for the boots and the wood, also need to enable silhouette. We'll need to create a new shader here, and that's going to be called cell noise, and we're going to put that in, drag it in here, and we will change the pattern to whirly 1, and it changes the scale and other things here. So right now we can adjust the scale and the pattern a little bit as well. So I think this might be okay for now. We can also use offset to also affect the edge a little bit, and we'll need to put the cell noise to the maps. So we'll put this into the scale, width scale. So I'm just going to click and drag this into the silhouette width scale. So it's kind of small to see that there, but I just applied it to that. And we'll do this to a couple other things. So for the wood, zoom a little bit there, and it's going to be the silhouette width scale. So there's the silhouette width scale there for the wood, and then I'm going to go down to the suspenders and do the same thing there. So let's go down, silhouette width scale. Oops. Alright, so now when I render this out, you should see that the edge of a few of the things that we applied it to will look a little weird and funky, and that's what we're going for. So it's a little hard to see here. So you can see the edge here, so I applied it to the boots, that it looks like kind of like it's hand-drawn, whereas the skin, which I didn't apply to, and I don't really like the color of the skin, the outline on the edge there is like a marker, so it looks very detailed, whereas the effect by adding the silhouette and creating the cell noise really makes the boot look like it's hand-drawn. So that's pretty much it. I mean, we went through this pretty long video going through, but you can see the results look fantastic. This is pretty impressive to see if you had a character moving in cell shaded form, and how quickly it renders. So this example took 6 seconds, and the results are quite nice. So it does take a little bit of time, but once you get started and get rolling, I think you just copy and paste with holding down Shift, and you end up with some pretty good, like this, with a lot of different shaders when it's all said and done, but the outcome looks pretty solid. So that's it for this video. Try it out on some characters, and you get the hang of it. It's really really cool, and there's a lot of different things you can adjust and try on your own. So that's it. Next week we'll look at some more.